Hi everyone, tonight I'm joined by Nathan Lee, who just came out of NCFCA's 2015 National Championship as the LD first place champion. Nathan, thanks for joining me tonight. I just want to get your perspective on nationals, encouraging thoughts to other debaters, and also I'd like to hear about a few key tactical moments so people can understand kind of what goes through the mind of a pro in some of these really intense situations. So, for starters, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm Nathan Lee. I've been debating, or this was my last year in debate. Overall, it's been 5 years total, and actually 4 of those years were team policy. And this past year, I was basically forced to switch to LD, and wasn't really super happy about it. But I'm glad I did now. I learned a lot. I'm from the Boston area, Massachusetts, Region 10. And I've always loved debate. Considering pursuing it in college right now, but I'm not too sure about that.
Awesome, thanks. So, tell me about finals then. Was that the key round of the tournament for you, or did you think there was another round before that? What was that experience like?
Well, finals was pretty surreal. I obviously never expected to be there. But finals was really tight. It was against a guy that Grayson, who was a great debater. I debated him before, actually, at the Massachusetts Open. And that was probably the closest, one of the closest, if not the closest round of the whole tournament and of the whole year. But again, I think Lincoln Douglas really comes down a lot to being able to solidify and condense the same arguments that you've been using throughout the year and being able to communicate them to a judge, because a lot of the rounds are very similar, or will be. And that was really the key there. Just going over the same arguments that I've been arguing before and being able to communicate those clearly to the judge. And of course, Grayson had his arguments that he was able to present clearly to the judge. And so I don't really know what the decision was quite yet because I don't have my ballots. But I know it was really close, so I have to guess that it was just a very, 5-4 decision.
Sure. So, what do you think was that? First of all, what was Grayson's best or most threatening argument, and then what do you think you did that edged it out?
Sure. So I think his best argument, and probably the best argument that overall that many people have argued, is that equity was subjective and that we don't know what equity is, and therefore the government has to interpret it. It's something that I used a lot when I was on affirmative. And he just kept hammering that again and again. We don't know the standards. He hasn't provided standards. And that means that the government has to interpret it, and that's very dangerous. To counter that, I tried a few different strategies throughout the year, but during nationals, I mainly used the idea that even if there are some gray areas, there are still bright lines that we use to determine right from wrong. And I basically straight up asked most debaters, and I don't remember if I asked Grayson this in cross-examination, but I know for many rounds I would simply ask, do you think fairness is based on right and wrong? And generally they would say yes, and then I would press that and say, do you think right and wrong is objective or subjective? And I think it's very hard for someone to say, especially in this kind of league, that truth is subjective. So I would use that basis to say, look, we may not always know the standards, but we do have bright lines to guide us. We know that murder is wrong. We know that stealing is wrong. And those are the kinds of things that we use to help determine those decisions. And I think that's, I don't know. I don't have the ballots in front of me, so I don't know exactly what the judges thought of that. But I would say that would be the way I responded to that argument.
Yeah, interesting. So, what I just realized is I think Grayson was also a longtime team policy debater, switched LD, right? So, it's funny because I tell so many people start in team policy, and if you want to switch, end in Lincoln Douglas, because I remember there was one time in NCFCA, I guess this was, I don't know, 2003, where it was an LD only tournament hosted back when they did such things. And so all my team policy friends went to this thing, and I think quarterfinals and up were all team policy people doing LD for the first time. So I have my own thoughts about what that is, but I'd really like to hear yours. What was most surprising about the switchover? What would you say to people switching over? And what would you say to LDers now about, maybe you should think about this a little bit differently?
Well, I think part of that, the success coming from debate is, and for me and Grayson, part of that was debating a long time in
Sure.
general. I think if you debate a long time, both of us have been in the elite for years, you will naturally get speaking experience. But I think team policy provides a really good foundation in learning to, A, think on your feet, and B, use evidence wisely. So, and I think the most important thing there is thinking on your feet, because in Lincoln Douglas, because you have a lot of the same arguments round to round, and you use the same case round to round, and a lot of the cases tend to be similar in leagues. I would say that it's very easy to get into a rhythm and to just use the same arguments and not really learn to think on your feet as well. Not that you don't always, but it's just easier to get into that habit. Whereas team policy, you're often facing very different cases. You're facing squirrel cases. Your rounds are completely different from each other in essence, and that helps you think on your feet. And I think that's really important when you switch over to Lincoln Douglas, because it allows you to always, when you're always thinking on your feet, you don't get trapped into the lull of always using the same arguments. And so you're kind of always looking for different opportunities to attack cases in different types of ways. And then I think also using evidence is really important. I found a lot of Lincoln Douglas debaters just use generic examples and don't quite learn to impact them as well as they might have. Whereas if you come from a team policy background, you definitely get the opportunity to learn how to use evidence really well. And I think that was also another, the reason I mentioned that is because that was also a key in my final round, is I hammered this piece of evidence that I had that clearly showed that equitable societies led to greater prosperity, which was his value. And because I was able to hammer that, and because I was able to present, look, this is the experts, and this is a factual outcome of our value debate, I think that also helped me to win the round. As far as what I would say to Lincoln Douglas debaters, I'm not sure what to say besides switch to TP.
A high five, yeah.
I will still rep TP because I think I like the style better than LD. Quite honestly, but both styles are valuable. It's really up to each person's preference. I know my sister loves LD and doesn't like TP as much, so I guess it's up to each person. But
yeah,
it's really valuable to get both perspectives.
I agree with that, and I'll tell you, going to college and doing team value, I absolutely loved it, and I found that I think the format of having an hour to discuss something versus 40 minutes changes the depth to which you go, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, what was something when you first made that crossover that, and maybe you kept it, like that people who had been value debaters their whole lives, they said, "What are you doing? That's crazy," or something that was unexpected in how you adapted your style?
Something that was unexpected for me. That's a good point. I'm not really sure if there's anything particularly unexpected. I suppose the main thing was being able to provide non-generic arguments, and by that I mean, again, coming from the TV background, we have to think a lot on your feet. I responded uniquely to each different case, and never always had the same responses to each case. Which, again, I think a lot of LDers do that, is they have their set responses and just use them round after round after round.
So you're saying that you're listening to in the moment of the round as if it's fresh.
Exactly. That's exactly right. As if it's fresh, approaching it from it clearly and just thinking on my feet. Like I would always, of course I would have my arguments that I used before, especially the ones that were really good, but I would always try to approach, the cases from a different perspective and from a news perspective, to think of what are the new arguments I can use, what are some new responses to this value or this thing that I've seen 100 times before. And I think that really helped just shift my approach and help me work out what were the best responses and kind of kept other debaters on their feet.
Well, before we switch gears to the future, is there anything else from Nationals, a story or some insight or just an encouragement that you found that you think is really worth sharing?
I think out of anything, the main thing that I would encourage is to bring for Lincoln Douglas debaters, to bring your cases down to something very condensed and solid at the end of the day. What I mean by that is to have some sort of overarching point. You point to that and you say, this is why I should win them this round. Because it's very easy, and it's easy for team policy debaters too, but I think it's less crucial in there. It's easy for Lincoln Douglas to just respond to all the arguments and assume that the judges will just flow all of them and decide a winner. And I found that the thing that was most helpful and that I've used most at nationals is condensing my position down to one or two key points. I guess you would call them voting issues in a way, but condensing my round down to one or 2 points that I say, these are the points that are most important. They didn't respond to them for X, Y, Z reasons, and that's why I should win the round. And not just responding to all the arguments and assuming that judges will flow them all. That was the main thing that I took from nationals as far as debate.
I think that's a really solid takeaway, and it's something that I've learned in the business world, in kind of marketing landscape, is you always want to have an X and Y axis on any issue. You want to know, first of all, how well is something going? Like, what should you think about it? But second, that's not really good data unless you know how important that issue is. And the best debaters, I think, do both of those at the same time. They make an argument, but they also evaluate its importance and do that, charitably and fairly. Not everything is equally important.
Exactly. Yeah. Impacts are actually really important. That would be another thing. It should just impact your arguments. Don't leave. For example, I'll give you an example. In the semifinal round, my opponent, I was again negative, and my opponent brought up the point that equity is subjective. But he didn't really. I think the flaw there was that he didn't really impact it. So he didn't say, why does that matter? Well, the reason it matters is because the government will decide what fairness is, and that leads to all sorts of abuse. But he didn't say that. He just said equity is subjective, and he didn't quite impact that as fully as he could have. And so that's another thing, is to just bring those high-level arguments and really impact them to what it means on the ground. And I think that would be a key point.
That's great. So yeah, tell me about the future. What are you thinking about college debate?
I'm not sure. I'm going to Cornell University.
Nice.
And I'm not 100% sure about the debate programs quite yet. As far as I know, they offer policy debate and British parliamentary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure about college policy debate. I've never had an experience, but I do have a couple friends that did BP in college, and that's very, as far as I know, very intense and very, very. It's essentially the only extracurricular you can do if you're really committed to winning. That's just what I heard from, especially at the top levels. So I'm not, I don't know about policy debate. I'll have to check that out. But as far as BP, I would either not do it or just scale it back and be on the B or C teams, because even though I love debate, I don't know if I would want that to be so consuming, because it is tons of prep, just a lot of work. So I'm not really sure at this point, though.
Sure. And what do you think about the new topics? Any advice to debaters on the new ones?
So I have to double check that it's the individual privacy versus national security. Was that it?
Yeah, it's privacy versus security, and then it's the federal court system.
Sure. The federal court system, on the one hand, I know a lot of the cases might be throwbacks to criminal justice here, but I find that okay, because I think a lot of the cases are really good and really important for learning about the criminal justice system. It's incredibly important to learn about the problems there. For the federal court system, I would really encourage debaters to take an analysis of prisons and the way prison sentencing works in the federal court system, because I think there's a lot of issues with that. I don't know if mandatory minimums would fit under there. I know they're and plea bargains, stuff like that. I haven't looked too much into it, but I think it'll be a really interesting topic. As far as the individual privacy versus national security, I'm not too sure about it. It seems kind of like a throwback to the one we had last year with freedom of the press, although just tweaked for individual privacy. But I know it will be really pertinent, because there's lots of cases where you look at the NSA spying programs and all the stuff that's been going around with that. I think that'll be a really pertinent topic. I haven't really hashed out any ideas for values or anything, just because I've been, focusing on work and so forth in college. But I think they'll be really interesting topic. I'm excited to see what people will come up with for sure.
Yeah, same here. Well, thanks for your time today. Any parting thoughts or words of encouragement you'd like to give the debaters out there?
Not particularly. Just try your best and keep at it. Actually, one thing that I learned from this year was probably the biggest thing that I learned in general about debate and about just what you like doing is do it because you like doing it and not just because you want to get a trophy. At the beginning of the year, I was debating because I wanted to get a trophy, and I didn't. And I was thinking, "Wow, LD, I don't like it, but I just want to I just want to win." And I kept failing. I flunked out in octave finals and again, tournament after tournament. I was like, "What is wrong?" And finally, before regionals, I decided, you know what? The reason I'm going to do debate at regionals and the reason I'm going to prep is because I love debate, not because I want to get a trophy. And I'm not saying that always correlates to success, but I think it will make you much happier debater, much more motivated to work if you do debate because you love it and not just because you want to get a nice trophy and have the applause of everyone. So I think that would be the biggest thing and the biggest encouragement for debaters out there.
I love it. Yep, trophies are a zero-sum game, but happiness is not.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Great. Everyone, Nathan Lee, NCFCA LD National Champion. Thank you, Nathan. Much appreciated.